As Wendy said, my name is Nelson Abreu. And first of all, thank you, Wendy and Victor, for having me over. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I started out in Portugal. That's where I was born. I grew up in the outskirts of Lisbon. And I had a fairly normal, average childhood. I had a Catholic upbringing, and I didn't get to travel a lot. My family didn't have a lot of means, but I had enough to have a happy childhood. And then all of a sudden, I had an opportunity to go to the U.S. And this events conspired for me to go to Fort Lauderdale, and I was in South Florida for my high school years. And then I went to University of Florida, studied electrical engineering. And around this time, halfway through high school, I started reading about hypnosis, out-of-body experiences, and things of the sort. And it wasn't long before I realized that it was interesting to read about these phenomena, but it would be a lot better to just experience them, right? And so I started having my own experiences, lucid dreams, the period between awake and sleep, hypnagogia, right? A hypnagogic period, and also out of body experiences and so on. All these different types of altered states. And I had them just by applying techniques that I was reading about, techniques with mantras, with breathing, meditations, concentration, imagination, you name it. I tried a whole bunch of techniques, and I had some success. And I was really excited to have my own experiences and my own explorations, not having to rely on what I read or what I learn in a class. Having my own personal direct experience, that was key for me. And I eventually got myself into a class with the International Academy of Consciousness, IAC, in Miami at the time. And I really liked their approach because it was very practical, and they did offer some philosophy, some framework for understanding the experience and applying in our day-to-day life, and try to understand how topics like life purpose and ethics came into play. But it was primarily a very practical approach, and they sought to be more exempt, more scientific in a sense. And I really liked that it was not like a new religion, but really just an exploration. And it was more about asking questions than finding final solutions, right? Finding like the right answer and then creating a new dogma around it. So I really liked the approach, and I became an instructor at IEC back in 2003. And then since then, I've taught their main program, the Consciousness Development Program, and I've developed my own research and courses, and I've been teaching ever since. Now, as an engineer, in parallel, I entered the power industry, the electrical power industry, and I worked in all kinds of power generation facilities, power transmission, distribution, and I got into renewable energy, commissioning equipment, systems, and solar, wind farms. And then I got into smart grid, which is about adding intelligence into the 100-year-old power system to make it more reliable, more efficient, greener. And that's what I do professionally as a day job, and I've been doing it for a while now. What happened more recently is after 15, going on 20 years of studying this subject and having my own experiences and helping others have their own experiences, about 8 years ago, I started writing about how our everyday concerns, like the economy, like political matters, the way the workplace is structured, our work life, and how these everyday issues when you dig deeper, they're actually built on a number of assumptions, on a number of power dynamics, flows of information. And as you go deeper, 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 you actually find the world of values, the world of attitudes and behaviors. If you go beneath that, that cultural level, you find the world of consciousness, the world of being, the world of energy. And it was really amazing for me as I studied economics or politics or the workplace, the environment and the environmental crises that we're living as well. Uh, all of them were pointing to the same place, which is consciousness. So at that moment, I was a bit torn, to tell the truth. On one hand, I was very happy to teach people to have these experiences, to go deeper into themselves. But on the other hand, this group of people tended to be fairly small. And while I was able to go very deeply, I felt like I was not addressing these wider ranging problems. And I felt like someone whose work maybe could be appreciated 100 years from now, 500 years from now. But then at the same time, the earth as we know it might not be around 100 years from now, the way things are going. And that bothered me. And I would also like to do things that speak to today, speak to the needs of everyday people. In other words, what I was getting at is that it seems that many different institutions and researchers and speakers who are in this arena of, let's just say, consciousness studies, that they were failing to connect with everyday people. In other words, it felt, and it still does feel to most people, that the things we talk about are just for a very small group of people, almost like an esoteric thing, and it doesn't apply to day-to-day life. And I beg to differ. So I started on this journey of articulating to everyday people the meaning and purpose and impact of the things that we do to their everyday life, and trying to create a language that would bridge the gap, right? And to elucidate and articulate all these applications to everyday life. One of the results of that was the book that Wendy just mentioned earlier, my new book called The Tao of the Tao. So the economics of being, the Tao as in the way, right, from Confucian philosophy, and then the Tao as in the Dow Industrial Index, right, the Dow Jones. And the idea being that if you want an economy that works for all of us, right? You're really talking about an economy of well-being, an economy of development, an economy based on consciousness, essentially, and the lessons of consciousness. If you want an environment that is healthier, again, you have to base it on those same principles, right? If you want a workplace that's healthy, same thing. If you want the kind of leadership that is going to move us forward, again, look to consciousness. And this book is essentially about that, how if we look deeper within these everyday realms, we will find answers by looking within, right? And that one will essentially affect the other. So we don't like the system we have. Most people don't. And the systems that have been tried before, most of them failed miserably also. So we don't necessarily want to go back to those. So what then? What, if we don't like A, don't like B, what do we do? Capitalism, communism, right? That has got to be something else, something better, something different. Maybe taking the best of each one, but really the answers are within. And in this book, I outline what that journey could look like of finding those answers. And I don't try to prescribe any full answers, but I provide multiple futures that can be sampled and taste it. And then the idea is for all of us to find how we can be part of those futures, those solutions, through our own leadership, because we're so desperate for leadership in today's world. But it seems like the leaders that we're going to find are the ones we see in the mirror every morning. Um, it's up to us essentially to make that difference. No one's coming to the rescue. I think it's really we have to be part of that solution. So it's also a bit of a call to arms in a sense to look within, to find the courage, the energy to make those changes. The final strand I want to say before I take some questions from you is that same journey that started almost 10 years ago of finding connections between the very physical everyday world and the world of consciousness led me in another path in parallel, which is I have a very practical profession, right? It's an applied profession, electrical engineering. It's taking things that are very abstract and mostly invisible, like electromagnetic fields and things like that, quantum mechanics, and converting that into things you can use, like electronics, communications, transmission of power, et cetera, et cetera. And so I get paid every day to work with invisible, strange things that people don't fully comprehend. But we know how to do something useful with it. Therefore, it's accepted, it's used. And the same idea, I think, can apply to consciousness, that we may have a type of technology application around consciousness that creates applications in everyday world, and therefore legitimizes it, normalizes it, makes it widespread, and not just accepted, but also used. This was the advice I got from the former dean of the College of Engineering at Princeton, who became very quickly dean emeritus as soon as he opened a laboratory to study consciousness, right? The PAIR laboratory, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, where they studied the interface between consciousness and the physical world, physical devices, and the transmission of information between people at great distances, things like that. So Dr. Robert John, he basically told me and others that we were the next people in line, right, to carry on the legacy, and that going through another 30 years of laboratory research wasn't going to transform society. They did that already. They showed the data, the very rigorous study that these phenomena were real, that they were worth looking at. What he thought is that we ought to take the knowledge that's been already revealed and find everyday applications, from games to very serious technology, that would engage with everyday people, with their everyday needs, with their everyday questions and concerns. And that way we could make a way forward in this movement, right, of bringing more awareness to the world. And so this idea of consciousness technology is obviously, for me as an engineer, very appealing, bridging two of my interests. And then my wife happens to also be an architect, another very practical profession, applied. So I was working on an app to help people have more out-of-body experiences. I was working on a technology that uses sound and vibration patterns to guide your mind so that your attention flows through your body in a way that mimics energy techniques, energy mindful techniques, like the ones I learned at IEC. And she was working on a pet pod for our ginormous, oversized cat. And at one point she thought, oh, we can put all these things together. We can make a pod for humans, a beautiful recliner for humans with the technology I've been developing that would guide your attention throughout your body and would guide you to do the energy techniques that would then help you have more of these experiences. And then, of course, we would develop an app and so on. So that turned into us actually building some technology and then realizing, well, we need a place to show it. So created a showroom in Los Angeles, which we called the Neuma Mind Spa and Showroom. So it's a place where you can go and try these technologies, have experiences, and be transformed. And it's a place for us to create more technologies and have people try them out. And this is a big part of what I'm doing now is uh, having everyday people actually have more experiences and framing those experiences in a way that interests them, right? So, for example, this just a couple of days ago, I published an article called well in a publication called Z Prime. Z Prime is a consultancy out of Texas in the energy industry. They're usually not interested at all in mindfulness, but they had a call for articles dealing with COVID-19, right? So we're all dealing with this pandemic. And what you notice is that in moments like this, of course, people need well-being, especially the first responders. They're out there fatigued, very much exposed. Their immune system is at most risk. So they need something to help them recover and be healthy, but so do all of us, right? We're all stressed and worried. So uh, mindfulness practices, out-of-body experiences, energy techniques, lucid dreaming, all of it. There's research showing that it helps with pain. Out-of-body experiences help with pain. Lucid dreams help with creative insight, which means creative problem solving. So that's the other part of it. We want well-being, but also we need to reimagine how we do things. We need to be innovative and rethink, reimagine. And that's what these phenomena have done for my life. They've helped with my well-being, emotional, energetic, mental well-being, to be more stable, to be more calm, to be calmer even in stressful situations. Even at work, when I'm working with high voltage electricity, I'm working with energy to keep me safe, actually, to save my life and that of my coworkers. But there's this other part, which is when you can tap into your mind in these different modes of thinking, you can have amazing ideas, amazing breakthroughs. So I was able to write an article in this everyday, very conventional type of realm about how out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, hypnagogic period, how they can be tapped into for relaxation, restoring body and mind, but also for innovation. And they accepted to publish it. And that was very interesting for me as a first, right? I'm talking about the things I've studied in consciousness now with my, engineering colleagues. They see an interest in that. I've just I'm finishing a master's degree at the University of Southern California on innovation, and the professors there, the students, my colleagues, they're all very interested. In fact, it's part of the curriculum. Except in the curriculum, they mention other ways of getting altered states. You can imagine what those are, but they were very receptive to these types of altered states. I'm in California, which, as you know, is the headquarters of major companies like Apple. And Steve Jobs, he's like a demigod around here, right? And you can find quotes from Steve Jobs talking about how important it was for his work to tap into altered states, right? Now, he probably dropped acid or something back in the day, right? But he was also into meditation and all these other things. So that's the other part of the work that I'm doing is basically connecting, making a bridge between everyday people and the kind of work that people who study near-death experiences are doing, right? I understand that that approach, when you go broader, maybe it won't go as deep for everyone. That's okay with me. If it becomes at least more accepted, imagine that out-of-body experiences, lucid dreams, become as widely known and practiced as yoga. It's true, the yoga that most people are doing right now, it's not the yoga that was being practiced in small groups in India, but it has made it more accessible. And if you go to a yoga conference and you ask people, have you ever had an out-of-body experience? Have you ever felt energy sensations and things like that? A lot of hands are going to go up. Not all of them, but a lot. So that's in a nutshell what I've been up to. So I'm wondering if you have questions for me. For me, consciousness is an agent that is in constant evolution, it's changing, and has the ability to interconnect with other such agents. So that's the best definition I've come up with. So in other words, we are an agent that can connect with others, and also that we are in constant evolution, or constantly changing. And we have some degree of self-awareness. But we're definitely, I can tell what we're not, in my opinion, we're not energy, for example, right? So we have the ability to manipulate energy, to affect energy in order to manifest and communicate and so on. But energy, as you know, can be completely transformed into something else, right? So what I'm positing is that you and I are more than, say, the light coming out of a light bulb, right? Or the noise that you hear when you're in between radio stations, right? You're tuning your radio, in between stations, you hear noise. That noise you're hearing is energy, right? But when you tune into an actual broadcast frequency, it's the same energy. But now it's been manipulated by another consciousness, another being, in a way that you've agreed so that you can communicate. And so there's information, there's meaning that's been added onto that energy, right? And that's why it's relevant to us. That's just to give you an example, right? So we're not energy, we're not even information, we're not meaning either, but we are the thing that makes meaning. And the more connection and meaning you have in a place, the more you feel energy, and the more rapport, the more similarity, the more in common you find with another, the more rapport you develop, until you find commonality and oneness with everyone. And then you really feel energy at a different level. So I guess the honest answer is I have no idea, but this is the best answer I can give you.
Trying to pin them down to whether it was a physical sort of, a physical consciousness or a spiritual consciousness.
All right, well, that's a little easier to tackle, I guess, because so once we get out of the philosophical, what is it, to just trying to narrow it down to something that maybe is more material or not. I think there, once if you consider, right, this idea that once the body dies, does the consciousness continue to manifest? Can it still exist? And there are, experiences like the out-of-body experience where it could provide you a way to study that. If you were able to communicate with a consciousness after it passed, it no longer has a physical body, but it's still reachable. You are still able to converse and get information that you had no way of getting any other way. Then that would give you some idea that, okay, that consciousness appears to be existing without a body. So I think that's one way, in which people have attempted to show that it's not just coming from the brain, although the brain is still very relevant for us here physically, because even if consciousness is ultimately more than just physical, it still has to connect with the physical machinery that we have. And that itself is a very interesting question. Even if you say, okay, consciousness is more than fine, let's just take that for granted for a second. How does it actually communicate with the brain? That is a really interesting question. My colleague, Wagner Algaretti, you can Google him or search for him on YouTube. He is doing some research that involves the functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, and he has been able to affect the fMRI machine without being in it, without touching it, using his so-called energy, right? Pointing to the idea, the very interesting idea that we might be able to show that there's something we can affect that is almost physical, but not quite physical, energy. And then if we can show that energy is a thing, that it exists, and that it can be studied with scientific methodology, then you have a perfect candidate for something that could act as an intermediary between consciousness and the physical body and the physical reality. You know, this thing we're calling energy, biofield, chi, right? It's also been around for forever in all cultures, but it's only now that we're starting to be able to measure it, or at least detect some effects of it. And that might be the first step to answering your big question. You know, so
Nelson,
I would say let's start
what Bill is getting at is, have you had direct contact with spirit? I mean,
if I have personally had it, yes.
Okay. Are we talking about sort of like an amorphous energy, or are we talking about the existence of spirit and the existence of entities after death? Many of the people here are mediums or have contact with spirit, direct contact. I know Bill sits in a circle. How does this mesh with your work in out-of-body experiences?
Yeah, so when you are having an out-of-body experience, you're able to engage more directly with what's out beyond the physical body. And that includes people that have passed, mentors or spirit guides. And it's not like a tenuous connection. It's more like you're in a virtual reality chat room engaging with them. And that's a lot more direct and palpable, and that gives you another level of confidence about things like the afterlife, because it's you have enough of those experiences, and then at least for you personally, it's not a matter of belief anymore. It's like, oh, you've been there. The other part is we talk a lot about the afterlife, but what about the before life?